Hi everybody, thanks for joining me today. This is for take 2 of the autofocus settings. I want to say a huge shout out and thank you to all the new subscribers, just awesome. So that's great, I really appreciate that, thank you. A lot of great comments, a lot of comments on the settings that I had recommended in the previous video. One thing I definitely want to mention is everyone will really find they have their own preferred settings. And I'm definitely not trying to say that these are the best way to do it. This camera is so complex and there's so many variables with what you shoot and the type of environments you shoot in that definitely, if you've got preferred settings, awesome, that's great. And all I'm trying to do is kind of showing you how I've tried to simplify this camera to still cover my bases. Like I said, I think there's a case for every single setting on this camera. The Nikon engineers wouldn't have included it if it wasn't valuable in some situation. I think what's happened is a lot of these settings are legacy settings. So a lot of these settings came from SLR days and DSLR days. And if you notice any of the new cameras, they rarely eliminate things. They tend to just add things. And I think it's because they don't want to tick off a lot of their customers that have preferred settings that they've been utilizing for years and they want to stick with that. So they tend to just add settings, and there's always a lot of overlap with new settings where I think you can eliminate some of those older setups. Firmware 2.0 for me has really done that. So in this situation here, when you're dealing with in-flight birds, with mixed contrast backgrounds, in Firmware 1.0, you really need to use one of the smaller boxes in the center of the frame in order to constrain where the camera was looking for your subject. And then you had with the bigger box, it was easier to get it over top of your subject as you're tracking. Now with the Auto Area AF, let the camera look at the whole sensor for the subjects, it's really good. And I think it's a situation where I think, for me, I'm happy to kind of let the camera take over that, especially out here in this situation. And then, so again, I'll kind of review settings we did. We're also going to look at some of the ones that I've eliminated, so you give an idea of what they do. You understand why I've eliminated them and where the overlap is that it's not really necessary. Okay, so let's get behind the camera and we'll kind of do some demonstrations of the settings I've chosen and why I've done so and what I've eliminated in this kind of autofocus for the birds. So we're going to have a look through the viewfinder here and have a look at all the different autofocus options, and then we can explain why I've decided to eliminate them going with the 3 settings I have. Okay, so first off, you got single point, which is one that I have decided to stick with. And I like the fact that it's a very small point, so that it gives you an option. You can eliminate branches, you can eliminate secondary subjects, and it does give you a small enough point, but it's still large enough that you can see it, but it's a little more precise for putting on your subject, and that's why I've gone with that one.
So one thing to point out is that single point does not utilize the subject detection features of this camera. My thinking behind selecting the single point AF over the wide area AF, which does utilize the subject detection. So the wide area AF small does utilize the in-camera subject detection mode. So that's why you might want to pick that one over the single point. The reason that I have gone this route is I figure at this point, the subject detection has not found the bird with either 3D tracking or auto area AF, and that's why I've switched to single point. And this way, I am basically then the override for picking where I want the camera to focus. And that's why I've chosen the single point AF as my third autofocus point. This is also handy if you want to photograph a tree or a boat, for example, where there is no subject detection for that.
So now you go to dynamic area, small. So this one is small, but it does also then uses the points around it to also try and pick up the subject. But in this situation, what sometimes might happen, it might pick up a branch, it might pick up the head of another bird. So I think for this, I think the dynamic functions and settings are not as useful anymore. And that's kind of why I've gone this route. So you've got small, you've got medium, and again, you can see how it's picking, it uses those points around the center subject to help pick up. So in this situation, it's picking up the buffle head there using the point on the outside. But if you had multiple subjects, it might pick up a subject outside of it, and that's trying to avoid that situation. Then you got the dynamic area large, and again, you can see how it's using the points quite a ways around that box. This made a lot of sense back in the DSLR days, and this was kind of one of the go-tos that it was, and that it worked for that camera. I think now the auto AF immediately removes or eliminates the need for that setting, especially between auto AF and 3D. So now you got area wide, so this eliminates the points around us. This is just the box. This is a small area wide. This one, there might be some value in utilizing this over the single point, especially in this sort of environment. But what I find is you're far more likely to pick up a branch. And so in the setting from yesterday, that single point's a lot less likely to pick up branches. If you're trying to pull that bird out where you've got a busy environment. So that's why I've picked the single point over the larger square. So this is the wide box, and this was kind of the go-to for firmware 1.0, where it was a large enough box, you could pick up the subject, and it will then pick up the subject within that box, and it's a really effective autofocus, no question. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you will actually pick this as one of your go-tos for an in-flight setting like this. If that was your primary focus, you're going to a really busy wildlife area, tons of birds flying in, if people are feeding ducks, that sort of thing, there's definitely an argument for this one. The reason I didn't pick this one, and the reason I've kind of gone with the auto AF is, when you're utilizing this box, so you can see the duck that's behind there right now, it's not picking it up. The duck has to be within the box, and I do find it's not super sensitive compared to 3D. In 3D, that duck is immediately picked up. Where I find for whatever reason, when you're using this large box, it doesn't like, it wants to pick up other subjects. It's not, you can see how it's not picking up the bird within that box. There we go, finally picked it up there. So I much prefer using 3D in this situation. So that box is kind of, and I think the auto area will have some of the same limitations as using the square box, but it gives you the options of finding subjects outside of it. So for me, the large area and also then the custom areas, I don't find I need them. In firmware 1.0, a lot of people made a really nice rectangular box. So for birds in flight, you put the rectangular box over it and it really kind of narrow down where you're looking. Same thing with waterfowl in the water. If you're low, put a long narrow box, you kind of put it right on the edge of the water horizon, and then you can, it's really good at finding your subject within that kind of really tight zone. I don't find it necessary anymore. I find the auto area has really, the update has really fixed that. So that's kind of another one of the reasons that I say I'm pretty comfortable eliminating those boxes, where in firmware 1.0, they definitely help to aid the camera in kind of getting those shots. Prior to this firmware, I sometimes find that the box, especially using 3D, the autofocus box gets tucked in the corner of the screen. You didn't realize it, and you're pushing the button and you're not seeing it. Now they have the new feature where you can actually make the outside of the box thicker. They've eliminated so many of the issues I was having with the camera in this firmware update, and that's one of them. So you got 10 options for autofocus settings for the autofocus area for the camera in photo mode. And so if you've got to scroll through 9 to get back to the 10th one that you want, you might miss your subject. And by only having the 3, where, like I said, you might find one of those other ones is absolutely perfect in some situation, But the auto area AF and the 3D, those two will cover your bases 98% of the time. And by only having them, you're far more likely to not miss the autofocus setting you're looking for if you only have a couple of them activated. We're going to go through it, uncheck all these again. So that now we're back to just single autofocus, 3D tracking, and auto area AF. And I really think that, like I say, if you know, and I think also to keep in mind with these settings, you know, a lot of times when people say, oh, there's this setting that's better or that setting that's better, if you use the camera every single day, yes, the muscle memory will be such that you remember what settings you're looking for. If you're a casual shooter, a weekend shooter, I feel that these settings kind of will really help you by simplifying things. You know, the professional photographer making recommendations, they are amazing. You can absolutely dial this camera into perfection for every single situation, but really only if you're using it every single day. And you get to really, you know, those settings are ingrained in you. What we're trying to do here is kind of just narrow down those situations, just make it a little bit easier for you.
So a quick review when I'm talking about switching between single point, 3D, and auto area AF. How I've set it up again is in the custom settings menu under controls. When you switch to shooting, I've set it so function 1 is the recall shooting functions hold. And it's really important that you pick the hold one, not the one above. Hold, basically, when you press it, means you only have to press the button, and then it holds those settings afterwards. So you only have to press the button, you don't actually have to hold the button. It's kind of counterintuitive. This is the one that I have set up for my single point, and I've unchecked all of these boxes so that the camera doesn't change settings from the shooting situation I'm already in. And like I said, I figure at this point I've already been out shooting for the day, so I don't want the camera, I don't want to have any of the, like the shutter speed, for example, I don't want to have that set at 1/400th or another setting in there, because it will then change the exposure for the scene that I've already been shooting in. Basically, you know, you're out there and the auto area AF or the 3D aren't picking up your subject, you want to push the button to switch to a single point. That's the only thing you want changing, is the single point. So that's how I've done that one. So that's how basically I only have the AF area mode set to single point. And then for custom function 2, this is now the cycle AF area mode. This was the new feature that was added in Firmware 2.0. And this is an amazing feature that for me has completely changed how I shoot this camera. So this one, I have everything unchecked except for 3D tracking and auto area AF. So this way, custom function 2 is are my two action settings. Both 3D and auto area AF are used on moving subjects, fast moving subjects. So my custom function 2 button goes between my autofocus settings in a fast environment, and then custom function 1 is a single point for kind of sticking on a single subject with not a lot of movement.
So we're on shooting bank A, which is great. We are in auto area AF, bird eye detect, and 20 frames per second. So one thing I do need to change, I kind of left the house, and so I ideally like to shoot about 1/1000th of a second, 1/1250th of a second in this sort of situation. Depending on how bright it is, you can definitely go a lot faster than that. But typically, anywhere you kind of put this camera, the ISO up to, most situations I want to be 3200 and under, but happy up to 6400, even 8000 in some situations when needed. I've been really, really happy, especially now in conjunction with the new software updates with Adobe. So you can see the white box there, how quickly it wants to pick up subjects. So right now it's not auto-focusing because I haven't got the AF on button pressed down. But as you move the camera around, you can see how it moves between the subjects. And you see that little white arrow. You use the D-pad, you can jump to the subject beside it. You can see the way there's a gray box on the goal on the right, and also on the left, and allows you to move between the subjects using the D-pad. So you can see here just again, this is on a very difficult background. We've got mountain background to sky. There's a big ship in the background there too. And the autofocus is just doing a phenomenal job of tracking that goal. It really has really changed the game for me anyway. The opportunities where any previous Nikon camera, other than the Z9, in this sort of situation, you'd find that the focus would jump to the background. You can see just how, even in the mixed settings here, that focus point stays on that bird the whole time. It's pretty incredible. They really have nailed this, and this is utilizing the auto area AF, and this basically uses the entire sensor, and then it's trying to pick up the bird subject from that whole sensor there. With the original Firmware 1.0, a lot of times people were switching to a larger box in order to try and keep it on the subject. Where now, as fast as you can track, this camera now picks up subjects. It's they've even as you go between different backgrounds. Okay, that goal was the perfect example right there. So it flew in from a bright blue background. It then was in the sun, flew into the shade, did a loop around from beach background to tree background, and the camera maintained focus throughout, which is just awesome. So there, again, very difficult lighting situation, and the camera did a great job of kind of picking it up. So where I do like switching to the 3D is 3D is really nice when you put it on a subject, it will stay on that subject. It's less likely to jump to the birds around it. So basically how your 3D works is you just put it over the head, put the autofocus point over the subject you want. You can release it and engage it over the subject you want, and it will hopefully lock on. They say, but you can see how amazing it is. It's sticking on the subject now. Oh, lost it right at the end there. Distant subjects are a little bit tougher, but as soon as it gets on it there, you can see it picks it up once it gets to a certain size. And then even as it flies along the edge of the ocean there, it's not losing it. I find 3D and auto area AF are, you can really kind of go between the two of them in a lot of these situations. 3D is just nice for helping to pick off a single subject a little bit easier at times. And I'm utilizing a FTZ adapted Nikon 200 to 500, which is not known as a overly fast lens, and in this situation, as you can see, it performs just awesome. With 3D tracking, once you've got your subject tracked, you can then recompose. So back in the days of using the AF on button versus the shutter button was you could focus on the bird on its eye centered and then recompose. Just by taking your thumb off the button, you could recompose and shoot away. And then you'd be able to have your subject off center without having to move the focal point around the screen. Nowadays, it's kind of different. You basically just put the 3D point as the center point. So looking at 3D here, I can recompose that shot by just holding the AF on button down. The camera stays on the bird, and that's the beautiful thing with 3D tracking. It allows you to recompose in the field while maintaining focus on your subject. So it's a really nice feature. Again, the three settings I picked are single point, 3D, and auto area AF. And so in a mixed setting like this where you've got a bunch of birds on the water, you've got the option where you can use 3D. So 3D, where you just put it over your subject and it follows. You've got the auto area AF where you let it pick the subjects, and then basically what I do is I'll often take my thumb off the AF on button and then engage it when it's over the subject I want. So as soon as the white box is on the subject, you see in this situation here it's struggling to pick it up. So this is where I've got the single point, engage the single point, and for distant subjects, so when you've got a subject that's kind of admittedly beyond what you would normally photograph, so a lot of times if you're struggling to get focus, it's probably because the subject is just too far. But you know, in this situation where if it was a rare bird, you know, orca swimming past and something where you wanted to kind of, an orca is a good example too, because where you can focus on the ripple where it went down and get the focal plane where it is, where you don't want it kind of moving around searching until it comes back up. So that's where sometimes the single point's nice as well. Same thing when you got birds diving here. It's nice, you don't necessarily want the focus kind of always coming back and forth with either the 3D or the auto area. You don't necessarily want it tracking all over the place. So you see the buffle head right here. If it dives down, by using the single point, the focus is still on that plane. So you follow the bubbles and then you're on that same plane and you haven't lost where the bird has gone down. And that's a nice feature of using single point. And also then if you're dealing with lots of birds here, where you can just pick up the subject you want, nice and simple, and you're just not having to mess around with it, switching between subjects on you. But what I do find when you switch to 3D, so see that one there, what happens a lot of times is, so in this situation where when the gold dives down, what happens is the eye goes away. As soon as the eye goes away, the camera starts looking for another subject. And that's one of the things. So in 3D mode, lock on is automatically set at 3, and auto area, I believe it does the whole 1 to 5. But in 3D mode, so in those situations where you've got birds diving or cleaning, you might find sometimes the focus wants to jump to another subject when the head goes away. So that's a nice feature for having the single point set up. So you can see it here as the bird tucks its head in. You might find it wants to, so this guy here, you can see the 3D, it's a bit shadowed right now. So things are moving around a little bit. So I just hit the single button, flick, and it stays on my subject, and I just keep it centered on the subject, and we have no problem with autofocus. And this might be a situation where you go and you put one of the larger boxes, you might prefer that. But I find the single point, like I said, because it works so well in the forest environment where you're eliminating branches and stuff, that's kind of why I've decided to go this route. And like I said, eliminating, I don't necessarily need the bigger box, and a lot of times it might pick up a ripple in the water in front and kind of pull focus forward a little bit. So you can see it's not perfect. There's definitely times where it will lose subject in the background a little bit here and there. But you know, you go back, 6-7 years to where we are today, it is pretty incredible. And again, this is with the FTZ adapted F mount 200 to 500. This is a lens that, it definitely, I think, gets a bad rap. I think it's far better than a lot of people let on. But it's definitely not up to the new 400-4.5 or the 600-6.3 primes, which would be another level of autofocus for sure. So again, this is kind of, I'd call it worst case scenario short of an adaptive Sigma lens or something else that's not Nikon. For me, it definitely works. I can definitely make it work. And I think the new firmware updates are just spectacular. Nikon's done an amazing job. And I'm really excited for this spring when all the warblers and everything show up and, get out. And yeah, like I say, it's kind of nice when you get gear that just inspires you. And this camera's done nothing but that. Just so excited. I think I've been out shooting more in the last 2 months than the last 2 years. So that's just awesome. That's when you make a big purchase of gear like this, obviously it's got to have benefits both technically, financially for me, but also inspirational. I'm really just, it's the opportunities it opens up, and now the new firmware 2.0 really opens up a whole other world of opportunities. The autofocus is great before, it's just taken it to a whole other level now, which is just amazing. Yeah, super pumped. I said I will be kind of in the next week or two. I've been working on it on and off, but I think I just decided to come out just to do a shorter video today talking about the new features of the firmware 2.0 and how they've kind of utilized them. So yeah, please like and subscribe if it's content you want to see more of. Until next time, see you out there.